This
Her
is our
family
land
rejected her
now.
for being ugly,
You tell your
until the
people to
cowboy
stay
said,
away,
"She is my
or there'll
woman
be
now."
trouble.
Wild West story. The farm was quiet now, but she knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. Her family would soon be bustling around, preparing for another long day of work. Clara had been living like this for as long as she could remember, working hard, yet never feeling appreciated. Her mirror sat crooked on the wall. Clara avoided looking at it most mornings. She had grown used to the whispers, the laughter behind her back, and the sharp comments from her family. "You'll never marry anyone, Clara," her mother often said, shaking her head as if it were the most obvious truth. Her father didn't say much, but his silence felt just as cold as words. And her sister, Emily, with her bright eyes and perfect smile, seemed to get all the attention and praise Clara longed for. She got dressed in her plain clothes and tied her hair back with a faded ribbon. Every morning, Clara performed her chores with quiet efficiency. She fed the chickens, swept the floors, and carried water from the well. She worked hard not to impress anyone but because there was no one else to do it. Sometimes she wished she could leave this farm, leave the town, leave the family that made her feel small. But where would she go? The world seemed big and dangerous, and she had nowhere to turn. Breakfast was the hardest part of the day. Clara sat at the wooden table while her family ate noisily, laughing and talking about everything except her. Her mother passed her a plate with little more than bread and butter. Emily's plate, on the other hand, was filled with eggs, bacon, and fresh milk. Clara tried not to let it bother her, but the sting of unfairness was sharp. She quietly ate her breakfast, hoping to make herself invisible, hoping her family would stop noticing her. "Clara, you'll never understand what people see in you if you keep looking at that sad face all the time," her mother said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. Clara's cheeks burned and she looked down at her plate. She wished she could disappear entirely. She wished someone would see her, really see her, for the person she was inside. After breakfast, she stepped outside to the fields. The morning air was crisp, and the sun had warmed the earth just enough for the soil to smell sweet and alive. Clara loved the fields. Here, she could move freely, work with her hands, and escape the harsh words of her family, if only for a little while. She began her usual tasks, feeding the animals, tending the garden, and repairing broken fences. It was hard work, but it gave her a sense of purpose that her family never offered. As she worked, she watched the other townspeople going about their day. Children ran past with laughter, merchants carried baskets of goods, and neighbors greeted each other warmly. Clara often felt invisible in these moments, like she didn't belong. She had tried to make friends, but most people seemed to see her as nothing more than the plain girl from the farm. It hurt, but she learned to carry it quietly. One afternoon, Clara found herself by the river that ran near the edge of her family's land. The water sparkled in the sun, and the gentle current seemed to carry away her sadness, if only for a moment. She sat on a flat rock and let her hands trail through the cool water. Here, she allowed herself to dream. She imagined a life where she could be appreciated, where someone would care for her, and where she would no longer feel the weight of her family's disapproval. "You've got a lot of strength, Clara," she whispered to herself. "One day someone will see it." But even as she spoke the words, doubt crept in. Would anyone really see her? Could she ever escape the shadow of her family's rejection? The questions lingered, but she didn't let them stop her from trying to hope. Back at the farm, her family's words were waiting. Her mother came to the fields, frowning as she watched Clara work. "Don't strain yourself too much, Clara. You wouldn't want to ruin your looks even more," she said, though it was meant as a joke. Clara's hands paused, her heart sinking. She wanted to tell her mother that looks were not everything, that her heart and mind mattered too, but she knew it would fall on deaf ears. Emily skipped past, laughing with a neighbor boy. "Clara, help me with the basket," Emily called, her voice bright and carefree. Clara forced a smile and helped her sister, even as a bitter feeling settled in her chest. Why was Emily always loved and admired while Clara was ignored or mocked? It seemed unfair, cruel even, but Clara had learned to accept it quietly. She had no choice. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Clara returned to the small room she called her own. She sat by the window and watched the colors of the sunset stretch across the sky. The orange and pink hues reminded her that there was beauty in the world, even if she felt invisible. She allowed herself a small moment of peace. Tomorrow would be another hard day, but tonight she could dream. In the distance, Clara thought she heard the faint sound of hooves. She paused, listening carefully. Maybe it was a traveler passing through town, someone from far away who would never know her. Or maybe it was nothing at all. She shook her head and returned to her chores, trying to ignore the spark of curiosity that had lit within her. As night fell, Clara lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about her life, her family, and the dreams she kept hidden deep inside her heart. She longed for acceptance, for love, for someone who could see past her appearance and recognize the person she truly was. She wondered if such a person even existed. And yet, despite everything, a small flicker of hope remained. Clara closed her eyes and whispered softly, "Maybe one day someone will see me." And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe it could happen. The wind outside carried the sounds of the quiet town, and for a brief moment, Clara felt that the world was bigger than her sadness, that perhaps her life could change in ways she had never imagined. The morning sun rose over the small town, casting long shadows across the dusty streets. Clara was already up, carrying a bucket of water from the well to the garden. The chores were never-ending, but they gave her something to do, something to focus on besides the harsh words she heard at home. She worked quietly, humming a soft tune to herself, letting the rhythm of her work calm her restless thoughts. That day, the town seemed different. Clara noticed people moving more quickly, speaking in hushed tones. She wondered what was going on, but she kept her head down and continued her work. Then she heard the faint sound of hooves approaching. Clara looked up and saw a figure riding into town on a strong, dark horse. The man was tall, with broad shoulders and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. Something about him made the town pause and watch. The man dismounted near the center of town. His boots were dusty, and the leather of his coat had clearly seen many miles of travel. Clara felt a strange curiosity. She had never seen him before, and yet there was something in his eyes, kind, observant, and calm, that drew her in. She quickly looked away, reminding herself that strangers rarely stayed long in their town. Most travelers came and went without notice, leaving the people behind unchanged. Clara spent the rest of the morning completing her chores, but she couldn't stop thinking about the man. Who was he? Where had he come from? And most importantly, why did he feel so different? She tried to shake the thoughts from her mind, but they lingered like the smell of fresh bread from the bakery in town. Later, as Clara was carrying a basket of laundry toward the river, she heard a familiar voice call out, "Need a hand with that?" She turned to see the man from the town square standing nearby. His hat was tipped slightly back, revealing a friendly, weathered face. His voice was warm and his eyes held a gentle curiosity. Clara hesitated. I can manage," she said softly, unsure why she felt nervous. "Suit yourself," he replied with a small smile, stepping closer anyway. "But if you change your mind, I'm right here." Something about this stranger made her feel seen. She nodded briefly and continued her work, but her mind was racing. Over the next few days, the man who introduced himself as James stayed in town. He helped where he could, repairing a broken fence, carrying heavy sacks of grain, and assisting neighbors with chores. He didn't boast or demand attention, but his presence was noticeable. People watched him work with admiration, and Clara found herself drawn to his calm, steady nature. One afternoon, Clara was carrying water to the animals when she heard a shout. One of the younger children in the town had fallen and scraped his knee. Clara rushed over, carrying the child to safety. Before she could tend to him properly, James appeared beside her. Together they cleaned the scrape, bandaged it carefully, and comforted the child. "Thank you," Clara said quietly, looking at James. "You didn't have to help." No one had ever spoken to her like that, acknowledging her efforts and treating her with respect. She smiled, a small, shy smile, and felt her heart lighten just a little. Over the next week, James and Clara spent more time together. He would ride into the fields to help her with chores, and sometimes they would sit by the river, talking about life, dreams, and the world beyond their town. Clara found herself laughing more than she had in years, and James seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts, her feelings, and her dreams. "You've got a strong spirit, Clara," James said one afternoon, as they watched the sun dip low over the hills. "Most people let life push them down, but you keep moving forward." She wasn't used to compliments, especially ones that recognized more than her appearance. "I don't know if I'm strong," she said softly. "I just try to keep going." For the first time in her life, she felt like someone truly understood her, not just her looks or her role in the family, but her heart, her mind, and her character. Word of James' kindness and work spread through the town, and soon Clara noticed that people began to treat her differently as well. They saw her helping James, admired her efforts, and began to speak to her with respect. It was a small change, but to Clara it felt like a huge step forward. One evening, as the sky turned pink and gold, James invited Clara to ride with him on his horse. At first she hesitated. She had never ridden so far before, and she was nervous about leaving the familiar paths of her home. But James' calm encouragement eased her fear. "You'll do fine," he said with a reassuring smile. "I'll be right here with you." I haven't felt this free in a long time. Over the following weeks, James and Clara's bond grew stronger. They worked side by side on tasks around town, shared meals, and talked long into the evenings by the river. Clara began to dream more boldly. She imagined a life where she could be loved for who she was, not judged for her appearance. She imagined a life filled with respect, laughter, and companionship. Her family, however, noticed the change in Clara. They whispered among themselves, disapproving of her growing closeness with James. "He's a stranger," her mother muttered one morning. "Why would he care about someone like Clara?" She had found someone who valued her, and that was more important than their judgment. One afternoon, James took Clara to a hill overlooking the town. They sat quietly, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Clara felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. "You know," James said softly, "life doesn't always treat people fairly. But sometimes it brings the right people into your life at the right time. I think that's what's happened with us. More than anyone else in this town." As the sun disappeared behind the horizon, Clara held James' hand tightly. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying with it a sense of promise and change. Clara realized that while her past had been full of pain, the future held something new, something full of possibility, hope, and perhaps even love. That evening, as Clara returned home, she felt a quiet strength inside her. Her family's words no longer defined her. She had found someone who truly saw her, and that made all the difference. For the first time in her life, she believed that her story was only just beginning. Days passed, and Clara's life began to change in small but meaningful ways. She woke each morning with a quiet excitement, wondering what the day would bring. The chores were still hard, and her family's coldness remained, but the presence of James brought a new light into her life. Every moment spent with him gave her courage and a sense of worth she had never known before. One morning, James arrived at the farm earlier than usual. He tipped his hat and smiled at Clara, who was already carrying a bucket of water to the garden. "Good morning," he said warmly. "Thought I'd help you with some work today." "That would help a lot." "I believe you can do anything you set your mind to," James said, glancing at her with an earnest gaze. "People may not always understand, but that doesn't mean you're any less capable or deserving." Over the next few weeks, Clara and James grew closer. They spent their mornings working side by side and their evenings by the river, sharing stories of their lives. James told tales of the wide-open plains, of towns he had visited, and the people he had met along the way. Clara listened intently, captivated not just by his stories but by the way he spoke, full of kindness, honesty, and respect. In turn, Clara shared her own experiences. She spoke of the struggles she had faced, the pain of rejection from her family, and the moments of loneliness that had shaped her. James listened patiently, never interrupting or judging. His presence made her feel safe, and his attention made her feel valued. For the first time, Clara realized that she could be seen and appreciated for her heart, her mind, and her spirit, not just her appearance. One afternoon, as they were walking through a field of tall grass, Clara stumbled over a hidden rock and nearly fell. James caught her by the arm, steadying her with a strong but gentle grip. "Careful," he said softly. "You've got to watch your step here." She walked taller, spoke with more confidence, and started believing in her own abilities. Even the townspeople began to see a different side of Clara. Her quiet strength and determination, combined with her kindness, earned her respect and admiration. But not everyone was pleased with these changes. Clara's family, especially her mother, noticed her growing closeness with James and whispered criticisms behind her back. "Why is she spending so much time with him?" her mother asked one morning. "He's just a traveler. He doesn't belong here." She had learned to trust her own feelings and judgment, and James' presence had shown her that her family's opinions did not define her. Still, a small part of her worried about what they might do next. One evening, James suggested they take a ride to the hill overlooking the town. Clara hesitated at first. She had never gone that far before, and the idea of leaving the familiar paths of the farm made her nervous. But James' calm reassurance encouraged her. "You'll be fine," he said, holding out his hand. "I'll be with you every step of the way." As they rode, the wind swept through her hair and the world seemed to stretch out endlessly before her. The fields, the river, the distant mountains, all of it felt alive and full of possibilities. Clara laughed, a sound of pure joy that surprised even herself. "You look happy," James said, glancing back at her with a gentle smile. "I am," Clara admitted. "I haven't felt this free in a long time." For the first time, she felt a sense of control over her own destiny. "I used to think I would never have a life like this," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. James took her hand gently. "Life has a way of surprising us, Clara. Sometimes the people who matter most come when we least expect them." She had never imagined anyone would see her in this way, would care for her so deeply and genuinely. She realized that she had found not only a friend but someone who truly believed in her, someone who saw her worth even when her family had not. The bond between Clara and James grew stronger with each passing day. They worked together, laughed together, and shared quiet moments under the vast sky. Clara began to dream more boldly about her future. She imagined a life where she could be happy, respected, and loved for who she truly was. She imagined a life beyond the farm, beyond the town, where she could grow and thrive. Her family, however, grew increasingly uneasy. They noticed the change in Clara's demeanor, her confidence, and the attention she received from the townspeople because of James' presence. "She's becoming too proud," her mother muttered one evening. "No man in his right mind would care for her." She had found someone who valued her, someone who cared for her happiness and respected her as a person. That was all that mattered. One day, James invited Clara to help him with a project on his small ranch just outside town. It was the first time she would leave the familiar fields of her home for a place that was entirely new. Clara felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. But James' calm presence reassured her. "You'll be fine," he said. "I'll guide you and we'll do this together." Each task brought her a quiet satisfaction, a feeling of accomplishment that had nothing to do with her appearance and everything to do with her hard work and determination. James watched her with admiration. "You're doing wonderfully," he said one evening as they rested under a large oak tree. "You have a strength inside you that not many people see." "But I see it." As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clara felt a sense of hope she had never known. The future seemed bright and full of possibilities. With James by her side, she knew she could face any challenge, overcome any doubt, and embrace a life full of happiness and respect. The days had grown longer, and the warmth of summer filled the small town with golden light. Clara felt stronger, happier, and more alive than she had in years. With James by her side, even the chores and hardships of daily life seemed easier. Yet, not everything was calm. Her family's disapproval had grown louder with each passing day. They whispered behind closed doors, muttering about how foolish Clara was to spend so much time with a stranger. One morning, as Clara and James were working together in the fields, her mother appeared at the edge of the property. Her face was stern and her eyes flashed with disapproval. "Clara," she called sharply, "stop this foolishness at once. You have no business running after a man like him." She had anticipated her family's disapproval, but hearing it spoken aloud was painful. She felt a surge of anger mixed with sadness. For so long, she had been made to feel small, unworthy, and invisible. But now, standing there with James by her side, she realized she no longer needed their approval. James stepped forward, his presence calm but firm. "Clara is her own person," he said clearly, his voice carrying across the fields. "She doesn't need anyone's permission to live her life or be happy. And I will not let anyone, not even her family, treat her as less than she is." Her father appeared at the edge of the field as well, his face shadowed with worry. "James," he said cautiously, "this isn't the way to handle things. Clara is our daughter. We only want what's best for her. She is strong, capable, and deserves happiness. I'm not here to harm her or take her away, but to stand with her." Clara felt a warmth in her chest as she realized she was no longer the timid, invisible girl she had been. She was someone who mattered, someone who could claim her own life. Over the next few days, Clara and James continued to work together, their bond growing even stronger. They repaired fences, helped neighbors with their chores, and spent long evenings by the river, talking about the future. Clara began to dream more boldly than ever before. She imagined a life filled with respect, kindness, and love, things she had never thought were possible for her. But the whispers from her family did not stop. One evening, as Clara returned home from helping James at the ranch, she overheard her mother and father speaking in the kitchen. "We can't let this continue," her mother said quietly. "The whole town is noticing. It will make us look foolish." She would not let them take away the happiness she had found. A few days later, an opportunity arose for Clara to confront her family openly. There was a town gathering at the local saloon, where neighbors and friends came together to share news, trade goods, and celebrate small victories. Clara and James arrived together, walking confidently through the crowd. She felt their eyes on her, some filled with curiosity, others with admiration. Her mother, spotting them from across the room, stormed forward. "Clara, how dare you come here with him?" she demanded. "You should be ashamed of yourself." Then she turned to her mother, her voice steady and clear. "I am not ashamed," she said. "I am happy, and I have the right to choose my own happiness." James stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Clara's shoulder. "Clara has a right to her life," he said firmly, "and I will stand by her. She is strong, kind, and deserving of respect. Anyone who cannot see that is not worth her time or attention." Clara felt a sense of power and validation she had never known before. For the first time, she realized that she was not alone. She had allies, respect, and the right to stand tall. Her mother, unable to continue the argument, turned and left the room. Emily looked at Clara with wide eyes, a mixture of surprise and admiration. Clara felt a small smile spread across her face. She had faced her family's disapproval openly and had not wavered. She had claimed her right to happiness, and no one could take that away from her. James squeezed her hand gently. "You were amazing," he said. "I'm proud of you." The bond between her and James felt stronger than ever, built on trust, respect, and shared courage. The following days brought a new sense of peace. Clara's family slowly began to understand that she was not going to be controlled. They saw her strength, her determination, and the respect she had earned from the townspeople. While they did not fully approve of James at first, they could not deny the positive changes in Clara. She was no longer the timid, quiet girl they had dismissed. She was a young woman with confidence, courage, and the right to her own life. Clara and James spent more time together at his ranch, working, talking, and enjoying the beauty of the open fields. They rode horses, tended the animals, and watched the sunsets from the hilltop. Every moment together strengthened their connection and deepened their affection. Clara felt truly happy for the first time in her life. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, James turned to Clara. "You have changed so much," he said softly. "I have seen your courage, your kindness, and your strength, and I want you to know I am proud to call you my woman." I feel the same," Clara whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "You have made me feel like I am worth something, like I truly belong. And I will be with you every step of the way." For the first time, Clara realized that the world was full of possibilities. She could choose her own path, follow her own dreams, and be with someone who respected and loved her. The future was bright, and she was ready to embrace it with courage, strength, and an open heart. The morning sun rose over the fields, casting golden light across the town and the surrounding hills. Clara woke with a sense of peace and excitement she had never felt before. Life had changed in ways she had once only dreamed of. Gone were the days of constant criticism and harsh words from her family. She had found someone who valued her, respected her, and saw her true worth. James was by her side, and together they were building a life full of hope, purpose, and happiness. Clara stepped outside and breathed deeply. The air smelled of fresh grass, wildflowers, and the faint scent of the river nearby. She could hear the soft sounds of the town waking, horses neighing, merchants opening their stalls, children laughing in the streets. It all felt alive, full of energy and possibility. She smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, and knew she was ready to face whatever the day might bring. James appeared at the edge of the garden, tipping his hat with a broad smile. "Morning, Clara," he said. "Ready for another day." She had learned to embrace each day fully, no longer fearing the judgments of others or doubting her own strength. Together, they walked through the fields, checking on the animals and making plans for the day. Clara had taken on more responsibilities at James' ranch, learning new skills and discovering strengths she had never known she possessed. She repaired fences, helped care for the horses, and even learned to handle the tools needed for small building projects. Each task gave her a sense of accomplishment and independence she had never experienced at home. The townspeople noticed the change in Clara as well. She had grown taller, more confident, and radiant in her quiet strength. They spoke to her with respect, some even seeking her advice or help in their own daily tasks. Clara felt proud, not because she had changed to gain attention, but because she had finally found herself. She had become the woman she had always wanted to be, kind, capable, and respected. Her family had also begun to understand that Clara was no longer the timid, quiet girl they had once dismissed. Her mother, though still cautious, had softened over time, seeing the positive influence James had brought into Clara's life. Her father had grown to respect her determination and independence. Even Emily, her younger sister, had begun to look at Clara with admiration and curiosity, perhaps wondering how she had found such courage and confidence. One afternoon, Clara and James rode together to the hill overlooking the town. The field stretched out endlessly below them, and the river sparkled in the sunlight. Clara felt a deep sense of freedom and possibility. She realized that she was no longer bound by the expectations of others or the shadows of her past. She could make her own choices, follow her dreams, and build a life full of happiness. "I used to think I would never be happy," Clara said softly, glancing at James. "I thought my life would always be full of disappointment and loneliness. I feel like I can face anything. And it's because of you, because you believed in me when no one else did." She had discovered that true happiness comes not from pleasing others, but from embracing who you are and surrounding yourself with people who value you. Over the following weeks, Clara and James continued to build their life together. They worked side by side on the ranch, shared meals under the open sky, and spent long evenings talking by the river. Clara learned to ride horses with confidence, care for the animals, and manage the daily responsibilities of ranch life. Each day brought new challenges, but also new joys and discoveries. One day, as Clara was tending to the garden, a group of townspeople came by to ask for her advice on planting and caring for crops. They spoke to her with respect and admiration, recognizing her knowledge and hard work. Clara smiled, realizing how far she had come. She had transformed from the girl who had been rejected and dismissed to a young woman who was valued, respected, and loved. Her family also came to visit the ranch from time to time. They saw the changes in Clara, the happiness in her eyes, and the respect she had earned from others. Slowly, their hearts softened, and they began to accept that Clara's life was now her own to shape. While they may not have fully understood her choices at first, they could see that she was thriving and that she had found true happiness. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of gold and pink, Clara and James sat together on a hill, looking out over the town and the river below. The world seemed vast and full of promise, and Clara felt a sense of peace and contentment she had never known. "James," she said, turning to him, "I can't thank you enough for everything. You've changed my life, not just by being here, but by helping me see my own worth." She realized that happiness was not about perfection or approval from others. It was about finding people who valued you, believing in yourself, and embracing life with courage and hope. As night fell, the stars twinkled above, and the world seemed calm and full of promise. Clara knew that she had found her place, her purpose, and her happiness. She had faced rejection, hardship, and doubt, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident than ever before. With James by her side, Clara felt ready for whatever the future might bring. She knew that together, they could face challenges, pursue dreams, and create a life full of love, respect, and joy. She had found not only a partner but a true companion, someone who would stand by her, support her, and share in all the moments, both big and small, that life had to offer. In the days that followed, Clara continued to grow and thrive. She worked on the ranch, helped neighbors, and nurtured the land with care and dedication. Her relationship with James blossomed, built on trust, respect, and genuine love. She laughed more, dreamed more boldly, and felt a sense of fulfillment she had never imagined possible. Clara's story became known throughout the town, a tale of courage, resilience, and the power of love. People admired her strength and determination, and many were inspired by the way she had faced rejection and found happiness on her own terms. She had transformed her life not by seeking approval, but by embracing herself and finding someone who truly saw her. And so, as the sun rose and set over the wide fields, Clara's life was filled with hope, joy, and purpose. She had found acceptance, love, and respect, not through changing herself to fit others' expectations, but by being true to who she was. She had claimed her life, her happiness, and her future, and nothing could take that away. With James by her side, she looked forward to each new day, knowing that the world was full of possibilities. She had faced the past, conquered her doubts, and found her place in the world. Clara had become a woman of strength, courage, and grace, proof that even in the face of rejection, hope and love could shine brighter than any darkness. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings, adventures, and dreams yet to be realized. Clara held James' hand tightly, feeling the warmth and reassurance of their bond. Together, they watched the sun dip below the horizon, ready to embrace whatever life had in store. For Clara, life had become a beautiful journey, one filled with love, respect, and the knowledge that she was worthy, cherished, and free to choose her own path. And in that freedom she found her greatest happiness.